There's only one, yeah.
I did see a couple of typos, I don't know if you ever caught them.
I probably didn't, please,
You want them changed?
Okay,
well,
what
please
I'll do is I'll
whoever
tell
runs
the,
up, just circle them
yeah,
out.
once you guys sit down, I'll tell you
Okay.
where the, it's just, one or two pages that have a little
You want this one?
inconsistency. Oh, okay, sure. Okay, so, not everybody's signed in. Vicky and Charles,
Yes.
you come up and be Regina and Anthony.
Sounds royal, Vicky. Regina sounds royal. I got to be a homeless person.
Regina's queen.
And then who's gonna be stage directions for this one? Stage directions?
Okay, volunteer.
Oh, no, this is your play, you can't be stage directions.
I'll do it if you want. I
Yeah,
don't know what
come.
I'm doing, but it's just
Well,
reading,
just-
highlighting.
Yep, that's exactly
I can
it.
do that.
Okay, so, on page
You have a
11,
pencil, I'll circle it.
oh, yes, okay, on page 11, go to page 11. I have you, okay.
I'll see.
On page 11,
Yeah.
you see Anthony's, let me get your pen. You see Anthony's speech in the middle that says, what is it like now? You said, cross that out because that's repeated on the next page.
Okay, it was like that.
So
So
just
just
take,
jump to the.
and
let's
Regina
see.
doesn't, just take that whole, from Regina's note wasn't like that to Anthony's, let's change the subject then.
The whole thing out.
Yeah.
Okay.
Okay, and then, further down, it says Anthony, the second time it says Anthony takes a notebook out of his pocket.
Bless you.
Thank you. Take
Maybe
out
he
the
has
second
multiple
one.
notebooks.
Right,
No, exactly.
and that's actually stage directions, but, the same page, same
I'm
page.
trying to
but
save
it's
your-
actually outlined, but I don't want you to be waiting for it.
Live it, doesn't have to
Yes,
say.
Anthony takes notebook out of his
Yeah,
pocket,
need your help,
and then
right?
Anthony takes notebook out of his pocket.
Okay, that's.
So take out the second one, okay, she will not read the second one. And on page 14, on page 14. Oh, no, that's the radio announcer, so that's where you're gonna do the radio announcer.
Okay, just wherever you have
Last
highlighted.
page. Yeah,
Okay.
change your voice for that.
Okay.
Oh,
Let's
okay.
see if there's any more.
This one.
That's good.
You go back, with just a little bit on that page, you take a look.
Misspellings.
So,
Tense.
this, read as much as you can, like, right, and then as you stop, then go back to your regular voice. That's you now, that's the stage directions.
Okay.
So this is the acting, and this is the stage directions.
Okay, got it.
Hi! Wait, I have it here, Ron. I'll put you down.
Okay, thanks.
Okay. You can begin.
So I do all this?
That's everything
Okay.
that's yellow.
Okay, 3 years later, a one-act play by Stephen Bosch. Setting: the play is set on a February morning in 1976 in an independent coffee shop on the east side of Manhattan, near the Civic Center, immediately west of Pace University and the Brooklyn Bridge. Characters: Regina Carmody, 25, single, youngest of 4 children, lifelong Brooklynite. Manager of an under-resourced coffee shop on the east side of Manhattan, near the Civic Center, immediately west of Pace University and the Brooklyn Bridge. Regina lives alone in the basement of the home of her parents, recently sold to her cousins. Anthony Bonifasi, Facci,
Yeah.
27, partner in a contracting business, youngest of 4 sons, also a lifelong Brooklynite, lifelong friend of Regina and her former fiance, married, father of 2 children. Regina and Anthony have had no contact in 3 years until the moment that this play begins.
Hi, I called you all here today because I want to tell you something important that happened to me in February 1976. This was how I looked then.
Strikes a faux glamour pose more like Bugs Bunny in drag than Christy Brinkley's supermodel of the moment. She turns to reveal beneath her apron straps a swath of electrician's tape that holds the dress together from the back.
I was working at my first job. It was a coffee shop in Manhattan, right in the Civic Center, way downtown on the east side, near Pace University and the Brooklyn Bridge. That will be important to remember in a little while. Take notes if you like. About the shop, this is my uniform, by the way. Like it? My boss got it from Goodwill. The name tag? He went to a Chamber of Commerce luncheon some time ago, found a bunch of blank name cards and holders on a table, and filled his pockets with them when no one was looking. That should tell you all you have to know about him. Sufficient to say also that since I'm telling this story, you won't be meeting him tonight.
Regina walks back slowly to the counter.
The place was empty. It was snowing really hard that morning. I was the manager. It had already been snowing a long time, so I had to come in real early so I could call our two waitresses and tell them to stay home. I don't often get the place to myself like this. I was looking for more news about the storm and tuned the radio to a classical music station we don't usually have on when customers are here.
Channel changing. She stops when she picks up WNYC, which is playing Dame Kiri
Takanawa.
Takanawa, singing Quando Meño.
Donde Meño.
I love this. I don't know the whole song, and I don't speak Italian, but I love this part.
Regina begins to lip sync to the soprano's rendition. The song ends to thunderous applause, which Regina accepts graciously. The applause fades and the morning announcer comes on. And that was Dame Kiri Takanawa. Yeah. Rendition of Quando Meño from La Boheme in concert last year from the Sydney Opera House. And at this moment we, that is all of us who are in the metropolitan area this morning, are under an officially designated blizzard, according to the National Weather Service. There are currently 6 inches of snow on the ground, and the 35-mile-per-hour winds are raising drifts reported as high as 3 to 5 feet in some areas. The winds will die down about noontime, but as many as 8 more inches are expected before the storm finally ends at about 6 o'clock tonight. Metro North and the Long Island Railroad are running behind schedule, as are the surface buses, but the subways carry on courageously. She turns off the stereo and makes up her mind to close the shop. She heads toward her coat and high boots at stage right. Suddenly, in comes a customer in a snorkel coat and bunker pants. He is carrying a large bag of carpenter tools with a sling that runs from his shoulder across his chest and down to his hip. He gets inside the shop when the wind comes up and knocks him off balance forward onto the floor. Regina races to help him off the floor. He rises to his knees and sits back on his heels. Regina pushes his hood back to reveal the face of Anthony Bonifaci, the last man on earth she wants to meet.
Anthony!
Regina?
Anthony turns to look out to see if the storm has let up any in the last 2 seconds. No such luck. He doesn't want to be there either, but he is cold, while his chest and head are hot from all the heat his clothes have kept in from the frigid air outside. He needs some rest.
Hi.
What do you want?
A cup of coffee?
There's nothing to eat. The delivery truck stopped running.
I just need some coffee.
You're a jerk.
I know. You sell coffee to jerks and blizzards?
I'll get the strychnine.
As long as it's hot.
Anthony clambers up off the floor, towing his tools after him like Marley's ghost. He takes a seat at the closest table. He zips his coat open to let the heat escape, takes several napkins from the dispenser, and mops the perspiration from his neck and face and through his hair. He bundles up the used napkins to throw away in a trash can while he waits for the blood to return to his feet.
So, it's 1976, bicentennial year. I read where they'll have big sailing ships, so you'll be able to see them from here. You're right by the Brooklyn Bridge.
Regina gives Anthony a long, steady look of complete disinterest mixed with anger. She sets up a tray at the counter, a sugar bowl, a creamer, a spoon, and her determination to be rid of this customer as soon as possible.
It's like crossing the North Pole out there. The wind whips off these buildings. It's like a cyclone.
I was going to close up.
All I need is coffee. We're working a job on Lafayette Street. I let my crew go early. They went up to Canal Street.
I don't care. I don't care about the ships. I don't care about the bicentennial. I wouldn't have cared if you froze out there. I haven't cared about you in 3 years. Finish your coffee and get out.
I didn't know you were here. This is the only place that's open. Are you the only waitress?
I'm the manager. Thanks for asking. We have 2 other girls, but with the storm, I called them earlier and told them to stay home.
Great place.
Regina pours fresh water into the coffee urn. She waits for the perking to stop.
It is what it is. Don't like it, don't stay. The owner couldn't find a tenant for the rent he wanted, so he opened this place. He's talking about retiring, Florida, and I hear he'll sell the whole building. But enough about me. I heard your father threw you out.
Yeah, news travels fast. How long have you been working here?
When did you dump me at the church?
3 years ago, and it wasn't at the church.
So it works out to being 2 years and 3 months since I started here. My father was in the restaurant supply business. The owner was one of his customers. I started as a waitress. Now I'm the manager. I tally up the receipts, I lock the door, and I see the place is clean all day long. And I didn't need you once. Got that?
Got it.
She draws a cup full directly from the spout.
So when exactly did you decide to dump me?
2 weeks before the wedding. And it was wrong. I should have told you before.
How long before?
Regina brings over the coffee and fixings on a tray to Anthony's table.
When I knew I loved someone else.
Regina sets the tray down.
And when was that?
6 weeks before I proposed to you.
Regina picks up the cup, cocks her arm back to let fly. At the last minute, she aims it over Anthony's head and throws hard.
Now I gotta pay for that.
You never pay for anything. You walk into my home and drop your bomb after we sent the invitations, and while we were figuring out who was going to pick up my grandmother and where everybody was going to sit at the reception.
I came over to your house and I told you to your face and in front of your father, and I expected him to belt me. I had it coming. You, your mother, your sisters, your brother turned into statues. By the way, you probably know already that nobody from the neighborhood will talk to me.
Just too tough.
That is all the families we knew that are still there. Lots of people have gone out to the island or up to Westchester. The factory jobs are going, and there are more vacant stores on the streets than I remember.
So all of a sudden you're Studs Terkel. You know my family, they don't read. The rest of the world can go to hell as far as they're concerned, as long as they can keep going.
If nobody in your family reads, how do you know Studs Terkel? You read his book, Working?
What do you care what I read? You dumped me. It was all arranged, and then you dumped me.
I know your father was tight about money. Did he offer to pay the bills?
After you left, my father sat me down with a big yellow pad, and together we worked out just how much he was stuck for. And he asked me how I was going to pay him back.
Did I ever mention when we were together that I thought your father was a jerk?
How dare you?
I'm a father myself now, a girl and a boy. If someday my daughter gets dumped by some guy just before her wedding, I won't tell her that I want my money back, and my wife feels the same way.
Your wife? Oh, the one you dumped me for? Right. The spick.
I've heard it before. It sounds uglier coming from you. And since we're talking to each other now, let's get the rules straight. You can call me every name in creation. I rate it. But don't start on her, not on my kids, because they are important. Because if they aren't, then what I did to you didn't mean anything.
Anthony goes for his wallet to show Regina the pictures he carries, but Regina anticipates his move and stops him.
I don't want to see their pictures. I don't want to know their names. They're nobodies to me.
Did your father help at all?
I didn't want my father to help. It was a mess. It was my mess. And I was responsible. I had to prove that I was Regina Carmody. I am worth something. And I proved it. With no help from anybody. Not my sisters, or my mother, or my brother. I'd show how you, Anthony Bonifaci, were too stupid to see what was right in front of you.
Gina returns to the counter and sets up another cup and saucer.
So, what happened? I've got to live with it. I want to know.
Anthony bends down and retrieves the broken cup from the floor and puts it upside down on the table.
I met her on the job. I just started working with my cousin Dino, the contractor. We were in this dentist's office putting on a new spit sink. She was the doctor's assistant. The doctor had a patient in the chair, so we had to wait. She and I started to talk. She reminded me of you. It was like it used to be with us. I didn't break up with you because I just started hating you. She's like you. She really talks to people and really listens when people talk to her.
So you were bored with me?
We started talking. It was like the best times I ever had with you were when we could talk to each other and each of us knew what the other one meant. Most of the time I'm trying to tell people what I think, and it's like I started speaking Chinese. They just don't get it. So I start repeating myself, and whatever they say, and most of the time they don't even notice. They just want you to agree with them.
Well, maybe I'm one of those other people.
It was like that movie we saw when this town was invaded by people from outer space who looked like everyone in the town, only they were dead inside. And only 2 people knew what was happening, and they raced around trying to warn everyone.
The girl's name was Donna Winter, and you had a crush on her.
She reminded me of you.
What? You thought I was built and British?
No, I thought you were you.
Regina raises the coffee pot. She is running out of patience.
If you don't start making sense, you'll wear this coffee home. What did I get from being the woman you loved to queen of the replicants?
You've been doing some reading, first working, now Invasion of the Body Snatchers.
Answer me. Your family, my family. It wouldn't matter to them if the whole world outside the neighborhood went straight to hell. That's them. It wouldn't have been that way with us.
I've wanted to be married to you since we were kids. But the closer I got to the wedding, I could see that we would have turned into our parents.
What?
Like our folks. My mother and father, your mother and father, they act like existence was something they didn't want, but were stuck with. Like it's a big imposition when they think it's safer not to want anything and do whatever everyone else does. That there's nothing to be done about it. Just get used to it.
You are crazy.
Did you ever hear your mother and father laugh together? Mine didn't. And it wasn't only days when they were dealing with mortgages and bills and raising kids.
And who do you think you are?
I'm me, Anthony Bonifaci. No big star. Thanks for the reminder. But you and I were going to be together after they'd all moved away, and we'd see them only once or twice a year. What were we going to do then? When we have a routine, but nothing else?
So what about this one that you married? Does she tell you when she's ticked off? Does she carry a knife like Carmen?
Where did you hear about Carmen?
This place closes at noon on Saturday. I'm on my own a lot now. I started listening to the opera on Saturday afternoon.
You listened to the opera with any of your old girlfriends?
No, we don't see so much of each other anymore. I was the one who lost her fiancé to another woman. Someone from outside. I was damaged goods, or too naive to be believed. My mother told me and my sisters, give the guy enough to know he's horny and then hook him. It had worked for all of them. My friends, my sisters, and their friends. She thought you and I had been sneaking around since we were 15 and doing it like rabbits behind their backs, and you left because you got bored with me.
Can't win for losing. By the way, did I ever mention I was never really thrilled with your mother either? And your sisters and their friends? Never really liked them so much.
You are crazy.
Tell me you weren't desperate to get out of your mother's house. Like everything was going to be great once you were out. Nothing stays fixed, Regina. You were going one way or the other. My father, he had that shop near the Navy Yard for 12 years. And for 12 years he kept a string of women going. Tuesdays and Thursdays without fail. Mostly Hispanic. Some black women if he wanted variety. Didn't want them next door, but...
And your brothers didn't know?
Of course they knew. And I found out that summer I worked for him. One woman, she showed up after closing time, and they argued. My father belted her with his fist, screamed at her. I got between them. My brother Nuncio heard, and he came in fast. The woman was married. She had a baby girl. I don't know if the baby was his.
And your brothers covered for him?
They were rooting for him. That's exactly what they wanted. Plenty of money coming in, so get whatever you can outside. You keep the wife of the neighbors and the kids, and to keep the house going. Figured he was entitled to whatever he could get for being such a great father. He's the boss. Who's going to tell him he can't? My mother, his old country. As long as they had a roof over their heads and the kids were fed and clothed, it's good enough for her. I know you didn't want that, but what if you changed? What if one morning you decided it was just too much trouble thinking for yourself and you acted like them?
You don't know that's what would happen.
The closer we got to it, everything was about the wedding, and nothing could stop that. Nothing like saying what we really felt. Nobody wanted that.
Why didn't you ask me?
You would have put me off until after the wedding. I could have goose-stepped into your house in a Gestapo uniform and said, Hitler had the right idea. And you would have said, Tony, you're so funny.
I was never that stupid. I was the last of 4 girls. My folks wanted to retire, get out of the house they'd lived in for 40 years and enjoy themselves. In Florida, everything would have been all right then.
So you had to make them happy by getting yourself off their hands.
No, it wasn't like that.
Let's change the subject for a minute. Still have a balance on what you owe your father?
What do you care?
Anthony takes a notebook out of his pocket and opens it.
I want you to see something.
Save it for someone who cares.
What my wife and I have is precious. It costs a lot. And you paid for part of it. So my wife and I decided we should pay you back. Still not allowed to use her name. I was still not allowed to use her name. I got a price list from a catering house we used for the wedding. He opened a special account at the bank. My wife doesn't think you're helpless or a charity case, but since you don't want to meet her, you'll have to take my word for it. This is what's in the account. If you want, I can send you a cashier's check to your house. I still know the address. If there's any left over, keep it.
Anthony puts the notebook face down on the table. Regina walks over, picks it up without looking at the page, and puts it into her apron pocket.
You still live in your parents' house?
They moved to Florida. They sold it to our cousins. I live in the basement and pay rent.
You like your cousins much?
What do you care? You're gonna snatch me off the damaged good table and sling me over your white Charger?
No. But getting back to the point, what do your parents do with themselves now that they're in Florida?
Well, my father still sells restaurant supplies. Lots of places to eat out where they are now. He's out of the house 8 or 10 hours a day. Sometimes 6 days a week.
Like he did up here. And your mom keeps house?
My sister Ellen lives down there with her husband and their kids. She teaches school. My other sisters live in California and Texas. My brother has a job at Cape Kennedy.
So they all got exactly what they wanted. Good for them. You see them?
Christmas and Easter, if I can get the time off, they don't insist much. So, what about you?
We live in Park Slope now. kind of on the edge. Black and Puerto Rican families. Our boy and girl are in St. Pius. I'm partners with my cousin now. My brothers run the business.
Your father retired?
He died 2 months ago. Just collapsed. I read about it in the obituaries.
Did you go to the funeral? Your mother didn't ask you to come?
It's the way he wanted it. He could have met his 4th grandson and 1st granddaughter. I respect your father's wishes, she told me when I called. Respect. Yeah, real big on respect, my father.
Your wife. Did you choose her because of what your father did? Was it penance for him?
How does anybody know how something starts? I wasn't thinking of him when I was talking to her. I felt alive. When I talked to my father, I felt dead.
There are some whispers around about him in the neighborhood. I heard them. I didn't want to know. I didn't really care. I thought after we were married, we'd have our own little perfect world and nobody could touch us. Is it perfect with her?
Perfect? Heck no. She's got me every day. I'm not easy to live with.
There's a lot around who are worse.
You know, you don't have to stay here. I mean this place. Doesn't look like they'll keep it open much longer.
There's a lot of places a good waitress can work.
Not only work.
You're not trying to rescue me from the damaged goods table.
No, you're good. You don't belong on the damaged goods table. It's 1976, the bicentennial year. Fresh start.
Anthony realizes he's talking too much. He zips up his coat and resumes his burden, which seems a little lighter now. He stands and puts down a $5 bill, mimes goodbye, and heads out the door. Regina waits. She turns and gets the keys from the register drawer. She gets her coat and boots from the corner. She takes the notebook out of her apron pocket and reads the last entry. She thinks. She tears out the page, crumples it, tosses it into the waste can. She doesn't look up to see Anthony leaving.
I've thought about it, and a lot since then. He didn't owe me. You didn't break us up. I did. He needed me, and I let you down. It won't change what happened. It changed me. I will never, ever sell myself out for security that secures nothing. If I ever do, then none of this meant anything.
She looks up and finds Anthony has gone. She runs to the front door. She looks stage left and calls out.
Tony, Tony, you were right.
Come on up.
Thank you.
The hot seat is yours.
Thank you. Very good, thank you. Just to warm everybody up, Joanne, thank you for pointing out the points. I found that my writing method is something close to chaotic. While, as you might suspect, there's a lot of copy and paste, which what I was hoping for, in the way of getting this actually in front of an audience, I did learn something from going to workshops at the Michael Chekhov Institute. I don't know if anybody ever heard of it. Well, Michael was Anton's nephew, and he was a student of Stanislavski, but he kind of separated from Stanislavski. He had a different view. And not that but one of the things that he was positive about was that the actor has within his own mind he called it the treasure house of experiences, not necessarily memories, imposing your life on the character, but there are things you know how they feel. to somebody else. His, at least the being there, besides the physical preparation, was also reading the text 7 times. 7. Before you even go in for the first rehearsal. Because when you have read it 7 times, you begin to engage in here, in your subconscious, and and the feelings start. I mean, I'm going on about this because I've seen it work. I was in a very tiny production of St. Joan, and I was the Inquisitor. And I don't know, probably everybody here has probably at least read the play in school. The point is that the Inquisitor is trying to hold, the whole case is coming apart. There have been commissions and investigations and boom, 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 boom. No resolution whatsoever. And the Inquisitor really believes that Joan is demonic. But nobody will take, to his mind, nobody takes it seriously. So at one point he's got to try to pull everybody in the room, all these second raters, who all the other first raters know this is a political show trial, and they're out of it. They don't want anything to do with it. So I'm explaining to everybody, I mean, what you have in front of you, and he said you will not have a tart who's just invites. And like I said, nobody gave me this, but I had the idea that, that at one point he says, you will see in front of you an innocence and guilelessness next to demonic subtlety, meaning it can't exist, and neither can she. Nobody gave me that. And so anyway, getting back to this work here, what I'm hoping for is, I mean, there's something that happened with Rod Serling when they were doing Requiem for a Heavyweight. I'm trying to remember the actress. Anybody remember the actress? I mean, there's Jack Palance, there was Ed Wynn, Keenan Wynn, and I keep drawing a blank on her name, but I can see her face. Point was that, pardon?
The original, I can.
Okay. But the point was when it was early television, which means you were you were getting pages practically right up to when they call it, and you went on live, which is really fun. Before the blocking, after the rehearsal, everybody had gotten their script. She came over to him and said, "Rod, I love this story. I want to be in this story." And I've read the all of her dialogue, and here is something, and I read these lines, and I've got to say, that's not what she'd say! Which is exactly what he wanted. He was very, very self-conscious about trying to write believable dialogue for women. He second-guessed himself an awful lot. So, because she had read and turned that character over, she now had a very bright picture of her. And it wasn't that she was trying to do a whole nother story. She was saying, the line is in here, and you buried it within all these other sections. We don't need them. This is the point. And, you know, it went from there. I mean, it was Ed Wynn's first straight part.
So how does that?
All right. Well, my point is, what I'm hoping for is that when we get, if and when I get this to actors, they will read it. They will see where this. What does it feel like to get dumped? What does it feel like? What does she guess? What it's like when nobody thinks you're worth it, or when people just figure, that's us. No, what good came out of Nazareth? But it's not. That's not us. This is who we are, and this is where. And there's nothing outside. And if there's nothing in here, tough luck.
So how does everybody feel? Does anybody have comments, suggestions, thoughts about the play?
I have a couple, but I'm not sure what you want. Do you want?
I'll take what you please offer it to me. I'll tell you.
Okay, it's not to do with acting, it's more like the character.
Okay,
You're very philosophical in your writing of your characters. There's a lot of provocative stuff in there. And I'm just thinking of dynamics. And I thought the guy was very solid compared to the gal.
yeah,
And you might get more energy, more dramatic energy in the play if he's not so solid. If there's issues that are starting to come out for him when he talks, because he seems so sure of himself, and to have made such good decisions. He's really very whole compared to her, and I'm thinking maybe he shouldn't be. Maybe he should have some serious weaknesses or doubts.
Well, he's moved on, although he still thinks of her, and he's sorry for what he did. He wants to make retribution. But yes, he moved on, he's got a family, so he's got a life, and she still doesn't. She's stuck where she was, you know, and doesn't realize that, hey, I'm still there. Even my family's moved on.
Right.
I'm still here. Why?
Yeah, I agree, and that is the structure of the
Yeah.
play. But moving on doesn't resolve all problems in life. You move on, you move into new
No,
problems.
the
So
man
it's-
said a couple of times where I'm not perfect, you know.
But he just-
that's what
He
everybody
just
says.
says it.
That's
He
what
just
everybody
says it.
says.
I need some more perfect.
Yeah,
She's humble.
because he knows that he's not, but he should really have, well, that's just a suggestion. That he
well,
should
no,
have-
this was what, I was worried about writing it, in that I really can't take this there seems to be a move or an assumption that if you've got a man and a woman, the man has to be a complete jerk or clueless. Like the closest we can get to a real grown-up be somebody like Ray Romano's character, who he takes 2 steps forward for every 3 steps. He takes 2 steps back for every 3 steps forward. I have more sympathy for the guy who falls down and gets back up again.
Yeah, I was wondering why you decided that the man should dump the woman rather than the woman dumping the man, and how it might have worked out if you did it in reverse.
Well, there it would have been completely different. Anthony's really has Regina's numbers, as they used to say. That at some point she was just as terrified of her parents in that, not of violence, but this was their view, and this is the world. There's nothing out there. There's nothing out there for us. This is the way you live. And in some parts she's believed them. So she wanted to do what was expected of her, and also was the escape, to get out of there, and just have to see them on holidays. And the problem is, when you make a bunch of compromises like that, how do you get out of them?
What did she allude to at the end when she said something about it's my fault also? Or?
Well, she realizes that Anthony isn't completely stone selfish. In some part, he has.
She made
He's influenced in his life. One of his goals is to do penance for his father.
I thought she was saying something. Maybe
Yeah.
I misunderstood. Was she
No.
saying something about how I drove into
Yeah,
this?
she was saying that probably that she looked too much of her own embarrassment and shame, and nobody listens to me. Well, they weren't going to, dear. They didn't have any comfort to give. This is how they lived. She was saying, looking at this, finding out that his brothers are money hounds, that they'll cut each other to pieces for that when the old man finally goes. And he needed her to pull him, to say, we don't have to live like that. I mean, and mean it, and knowing what's gone wrong.
Yeah, but where does she think that she drove him away?
At the same point where she pulled in, she didn't want to talk about anything other than all the 3,000 details of making a wedding. And remember, he's seen the worst. His father, not only a philanderer, possibly having an illegitimate child, and actually a wife beater. That he didn't do it to his own wife, maybe because he just figured that would scotch his game. But anybody outside, this man's worked with metal all of a good part of his life. He can deliver a pretty good left hook.
And another question, was it Tony, what's your name in the show?
Tony.
Tony says, my wife and I agreed that we should give you this amount of money, but I thought he stumbled into the place by accident.
Yeah.
They've been saving it for a long while. He didn't expect to meet her that day. But he did have the address, so maybe he was working up a nerve to write a letter and close the cashier's check.
I think you have some opportunity here when it comes to the actual staging.
Yeah.
Because, for example, nobody started the day expecting to see the other, right? And
Right.
in many ways, this is the last thing that you want. And she's angry, and she probably wants to deny everything about him. So, for example, the coffee cup in the beginning, like I can imagine this kind of in a staging, but it's a slightly larger room, right? And
Yeah.
however it is that it's set up, that he's almost lingering by the door, and he doesn't want to be there either, at least in the beginning. Even if this is an opportunity for reconciliation, and he's got this plan, overall, like, at the end of the day, he's clearly uncomfortable, and she's very uncomfortable, right? So, instead of bringing him coffee in the beginning, I almost wonder if she would be like, I'm not gonna set this place up for you, but maybe while they're talking, and she's learning more, and she's starting to figure out too, like, she doesn't want to be in some place where she's not loved either. Maybe that's the point, that they physically start getting at least somewhat closer to each other and somewhat more comfortable, right? And then maybe that's the point that she brings the coffee in, because it's such like a big moment, and I understand it's a good avenue or a tool to show that she's so angry, but instead of kind of like throwing it, it's kind of, I think, would be more interesting, very similar to what the gentleman in the front said. I'm so sorry, I don't know your name, but that just like Tony again, that you want to have them, maybe him a little bit less whole because he's so well formed. I think that would be interesting. Those places of friction, right, where the story really starts becoming even more dynamic.
Does she sit down at any time? Do you ever sitting down?
No,
Because I would ever slump into a chair with resignation at some point, and they're a little closer, but then this gives them a chance to get apart.
The time for her to sit down would be when she wants to get closure and she's asking him what really happened. Why did you leave? That would be the time to sit down.
But I think that something like that is something for the director.
Oh, of
And
course.
to develop,
yeah.
rather than the
Well,
stage direction.
that's
That's a
the
comment I have, because they didn't see it, but you have to really curtail your stage directions and leave it.
All right.
Trust the people who are gonna flesh this out
Yeah,
to do that.
yeah.
Big things like throwing the cup, but there were a lot of things that I didn't have stage directions read, because they don't belong, the writer does not belong telling the actors and the director how to stage it. That's up to them.
time in that, though.
Yeah, no, there are a
So look
lot
at
of,
Shakespeare, there's no stage
there are a lot of.
There's no interviews with
Better.
there's no interview with the London Times either.
Actors,
It
it doesn't matter.
inhibits the creativity
Yeah,
of the production team,
yeah,
and they either have to decide to go along with those things
yeah,
and try and match the exact vision that the playwright had,
yeah.
or to flesh it out from the
Yeah.
words
Yeah.
of how it should be actually done,
Yeah.
and go against the playwright if it's written. So, that's kind of a
Well,
challenge.
what I was thinking of was, it's a little bit of far field. I saw an interview with Dennis Hopper once, and he talked about his short period as a contract player. This was about at the end of the old studio system. And he was working with a director, an old-timer, who'd come up from the silence. And this guy was used to working with actors who, 2 weeks before, were loading a truck. So he used to, if you had a scene in the saloon, okay, then, what's your name, kid? Yeah. Come in here, turn left, walk up here, put your right arm on the table, and now here was Hopper out of Stanislavski, and
Right.
so they had a lot of fun, and he wound up on a suspension. And he decided it was a better idea to get back to work, and they did the scene, they caught up, and the picture was finished on time, which is, above all else, it has to be finished on time. But he said to the director, look, sir, I didn't mean to disrespect you, and I'm sorry if I offended you. But how does that make me a better actor if you're making all the decisions for me?
Right.
He says, kid, this isn't about being a better actor, you're just smarter. Your old crock tells you to do something, you do it.
Okay, well, thank you, Steve. Okay, let's